welcome everyone. Welcome, welcome. Banistana. Manistana. Manistana. Manistana Laila ze. Manistana Laila ze. Manistana Laila ze. Mikol halelo. Manistana Laila ze. Mikol halelot, Mikol halelot, Mikol halelot, Mikol halelot, Mikol, 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 Mikol halelot. Manistana. Manistana. Manistana Laila Hase. Mikol halelot. Mikol halelot. Manistana. Manistana.
Thank you, Shira. And it begins to feel like Passover. Good evening, friends, or whatever time zone you are in. I'm Amichai. I know many of you, maybe all of you. I'm here with Shira Klein. We are part of the leadership team of Lab Shul, and we're excited to welcome you tonight to help us, help you, help all of us together prepare for Passover night that is coming very soon. This coming Sunday is the new moon of the month of Nisan. And by the time the moon is full, 2 weeks hence, we will be sitting around tables, or however we will choose to, and practice the ancient tradition of the procedure, which is not a bad translation of the word Seder, order, in which we celebrate the Exodus. So tonight is Save Seder. Some of you have been with us before as we've been experimenting with lab shul style ways of really making sure that Passover night is not a dial in, that we're not just reading everything cover to cover, but we're actually really paying attention to what this liturgy, what this leaning into liberation is about. So in a moment, more about what we're all doing here. Curious what brings you here tonight. We just want to say that every year for the past decade plus, we've been reimagining Seder night and inviting ourselves into conversations of great meaning making. And this year, how is Manishtana? How is this year different? Even from last year, there was already a terrible war waged between Israel and Hamas. So many casualties, so much sorrow, so many questions about freedom and liberation and the price. And this year we're still at it. And there are so many protests for freedom and for resistance. And in the United States, we're in the middle of a really tight spot. So this is an ancient holiday. This tradition goes back. Anita Diamond, a friend and teacher of us, calls this a night of an exercise in collective optimism. And this is really an invitation in the middle of painful and uncertain times to ask big questions, to come around a table with people we know and love, or maybe don't know as well, friends, new guests, and maybe that it's hard to love this year with so many ways that we are split and polarized. But this is a way to make it a night that is different than all other nights and meaningful and delicious and about resilience and hope and optimism and a container for important conversation. That really is what it is about for me, for us, and hopefully for you tonight. Um, so before we go further, we'll talk about what we're going to do tonight. We have about an hour together, under an hour, to go through our Seder 2025, our proposal of 4 new questions for the Seder, plus the bonus Afikomen exercise about really walking our talk of liberation and justice. And then we're going to split off into 2 groups, where you have the option of working with Shira and really thinking about families and young families and how do we make Seder really meaningful and embodied for all ages. You can stay with me and talk about it if you're here to really think about grown-ups and how to make Seder meaningful for them. Obviously, there's a lot of weaving and we'll see how it goes. So before we go into our agenda tonight, would really love to hear for just a moment or two from you. What brings you here tonight, friends? Are you here because you are going to be hosting a Passover Seder for the first or not first time? Is it a complication or an excitement or both with people that you need to engage in a new way? Are you going to be a guest and you want to bring some content? Or are you just curious about how to make meaning of Passover 2025 with everything we just talked about? So that's really, let's just take really a couple of moments if you want to put it in the chat. And I'm going to ask just like 2 or 3 of us to very briefly, if you feel called to unmute and just share with us who you are and what brings you here tonight. What is your kavanah, your intention? And we will ground ourselves together um, this way. Paul Adam, welcome. Making things inventive and not boring. Great, which means you might have some kind of a leadership role, or you can be able to bring it to a family or friend Seder. Great. Someone else, feel free to really put in the chat or unmute. Yeah, Julie, if that's a raised hand, we would love to briefly
It's a
hear from you.
raised hand. Thank you for doing this. I just want to make it fresh. I want to be more inclusive, less reading, and we do that. But I'm just
I'm
grateful
good.
to have a little dialogue or talk with everybody about some possibilities, some creative
Great,
ones.
wonderful. And do you have the keys to lead the Seder? Who's
I
driving?
have the keys.
All right.
I have the keys, and then I share the keys all around.
Awesome. We like co-pilots. So I'm asking because what of tonight will be, we're gonna empower you, invite you to be thoughtful of like Seder has leadership and it's wonderful in a circle and pop up and popcorn and every more voices. Somebody needs to take charge and say, that's what we're doing tonight. And maybe as a group, maybe as a team and prepared. So good. Julie, thank you for saying so, as Paul Adam has as well. And I'm quickly just going to say in the chat, we're seeing Terry saying, I host every year. I hope to have a dynamic, interactive experience, 3 generations, but have one person of having ownership of our created Haggadah and likes to pontificate. Oh, yes. I know those people. That's me often. So we're going to have to figure out the balance. We're not going to get to all of the Seder guidance tonight, but we're hoping that we're sharing with you tonight, whether you're going to read the whole Haggadah, whether there's people who like to often lead, whether you're going to lead, that this will be additional ways to do exactly what you've said. Make it exciting, making meaningful, make it dynamic and interactive. Andrea, you've raised your hand, so we'd love to briefly hear from you. And then Shira, tell us a little, and then I'm going to come back to you.
I'll just briefly say, so we've done it for years. Last year, we kind of buckled because I just felt so uncomfortable after October 7th, the nature of who we have. I don't feel good about it still, that we just sort of did it so bare bones, just our tiny little family. And this year I'm determined, I feel rejuvenated. But to be honest, I guess the Seder could do this for us, but I feel with what's going on in this country now that I am in such a place of Mitzrayim. Like I am in such a compressed, narrow place a lot of the time. I'm working hard constantly to not be there. So I'm kind of hoping that this will just give me just a little bit of a like a bump to just like get into more of the planning. We always do supplemental readings. It's very broad. We do a lot of music, but it's sort of like inspiration and sort of like
Yeah.
gasoline.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, wow, gasoline it is. Thank you, Andrea. Beautiful. Judy and Michael, I'm seeing you. I'm going to ask you to wait for a little bit. We're going to come back to you in a bit as we go into it, if that's okay. We just wanted to sort of set the general stage, and we're seeing what you're seeing. We want to energize and wrestle. Michael, you'll be at your daughter's first Seder, and we're excited to hear about your dream journey. So our intentions tonight is really to give you some tools, whether you're guests or hosts, however it is, to be able to bring this meaning making into it and how to gather with intentionality. Um, so Shira, I'm curious whether you want to share anything. We've done this last year. Your sister was with us for this first session to think about
Yeah.
place thinking and
Well,
guesting. What's your
yeah,
kavana?
I love this. I remember that the question of money shana, like what was different this year. Aliza, my big sis, who's the founder of One Table, really is like an entire organization just based on bringing people around the table, which is like, and you know, we often we say it here at Lab Shul in our last Freedom Feast. We said Seder says, come to the table. You know, do you remember that? Call your cousins and bring them to the table. Call your family and bring them to the table. We need to talk. Seder says, come to the table. And I remember Aliza spoke last year about the way to get people to the table. Number one way to get people to the table, invite them, officially invite them. And that was her like extremely data based learning that she shared with us from all of the data collection of her organization. It was all about inviting people to the Shabbat table. Was that the number one thing that people need to get to the table, if that's what you're looking for, if you want people to come to the table, is to invite them.
Yeah.
And to like, and so she started there, and about like, we're in a place of polarization. We're in a place where we're afraid to find each other, to see each other, to talk to each other, especially to listen to each other. Like, set your table with intention and care. Invite them carefully. Give parameters. Like, tell people ahead of time, we won't be talking about this. We will be talking about this. She talked about also, I remember she spoke about once you have people at the table, how are you going to keep them at the table? And she brought this up particularly is as a the Seder is so multi-generational. And so where one generation wants to talk about this, another generation doesn't want to talk about that. So she spoke to us a lot about intentionality around shaping a meal and finding ways to really build in like full blown like listening exercises, like how to tell the Magid story, the how to ask those questions in a way that promotes listening as opposed to like a like panel discussion or a presentational, like as we mentioned before, just reading out of the Haggadah. So what is listening today? It's dialogue. And I remember that. And I think that that might be what my intention is this year, that the listening, how do I keep people at the table? How do I encourage listening is through dialogue.
Yeah.
But I
Thank
will
you.
say that my almost 90-year-old father met with me today as he's like, Shira, we got to plan the first night Seder. And you know what he said? I mean, there was no talking him out of this. This was like, he said, the only thing that matters to me this year on Passover is that we sing. And I want to sing on every single page of the Haggadah. I want to sing a song for every single thing. I don't care what. I just want to be sure that we're singing. That's what he said. So
Mm,
that's my orders.
beautiful. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. So thank you for this intentionality, reminding us last year's beautiful session. We did four of these last year, and this year we're just condensing it to a single session. We feel everyone's so fraught. And really, one of the things that Lisa taught us was the invitation, right? It's 2 weeks away. The invitation is not just come for Seder. We have to be intentional of like what it is we're inviting people for. And as we think about the art of gathering, the table, not just the aesthetics, but really how from A to Z do we make it a night of questions and a night of a container of complexity and optimism? We need joy as well. So based on who's there and how it is, we're not going to get to all the trappings of how to make Seder great. We want to talk about those four new questions. So let me get right into it because our time is tight, and then we'll have more time to talk in breakout rooms as well. So, as many of you know, in the traditional Passover Seder, there is the Haggadah, the telling of the story. It is a booklet that was created by the rabbis almost 2,000 years ago as a way to give us a recipe for sitting around the table and not just making it up. And it was created as an anthology. It was created as a series of ritual moments, 15 from Kadesh, sanctification with the first cup of wine, and then 4 cups of wine, all the way to Nirtzah at the end, the end. And in the middle, there's a lot of singing, and there is storytelling, and there are quotations, and there are teachings, and some of them are fantastic and beloved, and some of them make you scratch your head every single time. And like, what the hell were they thinking? And the fact is, whatever they were thinking, the Passover Seder, and there's so many variations, translations, and additions, is an anthology. It's suggested reading. So let me put it right there. Do not feel that you are obligated to read the whole thing from cover to cover. If anybody get mad at you, send them to me. Say the rabbi said so. Because really, it's an anthology. We cannot do the whole thing and have enough time for conversation and singing and just chilling out. So we are suggesting, if you're the guest, if you're the host, prep ahead and see what are your highlights for this year that is so different than other years. Maybe this is the year to do Dayenu, but not the 4 children. Maybe this is the one where you take out some of the other things you're just not crazy about so that grandpa can have something to say, or one of the children, etc., etc. Part of the Seder motif is the number 4, 4 cups, 4 ways of redemption, 4 questions, 4 children. We've taken the 4 questions for many years now and reinvented them so that the Seder is structured around 4 questions from the very beginning. All right. So imagine it's Passover night. It's going to be Saturday night this year. However, people have gathered, I usually do Bloody Miriams and mimosas before people even sit down, free drinks, and however we're seated, music, singing, clink, 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 bit of commotion, everyone looks great. Into the first question right away, and the first question is Manishtana. Shira already began singing Manishtana for us this evening. Often it's the youngest child that sings it. We have 4 questions written by the rabbis. How is this night different than all other nights? Here is our version of Manishtana, right? It's our icebreaker, right? Manischewitz spirit sounds pretty good too. Taylor, we're going to ask you to put in the chat our first question, and you will also see that the links are in our chat to the host guide and just to the one-pager. I'm going to invite us tonight to look at the host guide because we're really going to look at the full picture. And here is the first question. Ma nishtana. How are we different this year? And Taylor, if you can put the next little paragraph there as well, there we go. Here's the question, which we can read out loud or paraphrase. We ask ourselves and each other with tender truth, how are we different tonight from the way we were just a year ago on this night? What has changed? Do our differences define us at this challenging time of growing gaps and polarization that divide us over political and ideological lines? What still unites us as we identify common ground and shared commitments to collective liberation? That is a mouthful, and you just had your first cup of wine. So it's an important mouthful, but I'm going to ask you to imagine that you're gathered around the table and you're starting by saying, Manishtana, hey, how are we different this year? Let's look around the table. Is anybody with us who wasn't with us last year? Are there new babies? Are there new partners, new friends, new relatives who are joining us? Is anybody missing? Is there an empty chair for a relative who's no longer with us? There's still 59 hostages and many, many people bereaved and suffering in Israel and Palestine, Ukraine, United States, all over the world. Who's with us? Who's not with us? How are we different? Bro, think about that as the opening question for your Seder. With whatever tonality, we'll make sure everybody gets to go around, say who they are, and say, here's how I'm a little different this year, or a lot different than last year. Here's how we as a family, as a nation, as a people are different. First question, maybe with the first cup, maybe with a intention setting, a North Star. We're here tonight to ask 4 questions, to see where it hurts, see where it heals, see how we hope. Question number 1. Shira, any thoughts that come to
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, I want to offer that there's a few different ways to translate this question. So it's often translated like, why is this night different? Or how is this night different? But the word ma, it comes in the sense of what, and what by the what. What's the what here? What is going on here that is different? And I want us to allow that to like open up to the conversation of like what is happening. A real call to presence, not an analysis of or a reflection of, but like for real, what is different? What is happening? Another way to also see it is like what is making a difference tonight? What
Yeah.
is causing change tonight? In my preparation to meet with all of you, I asked myself, what is causing change tonight? And I thought, you being here with you. I'm excited for that moment in the Seder to start like that and to really say, like, whoa, we are entering into a sacred space. We are entering into ceremony, into ritual land where we can put a protective measure around the table, which it already is, but there's many ways that we're already doing that. But that's what's happening here. And when we ask this question, it is not just a reflection question. It's a ritual question that helps us to like turn the motion of the spell that is the Seder that leads us to question number 4, which we'll get to. But it's no coincidence that we start by naming what's present, and that's what's going to help us get to where do we want to go.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to say the moment of presence is like, take a breath, everyone. Here we are. It's Seder 2025. We made it. We're here. It's okay to start with some kind of a way of getting us present. And Michael, I want to acknowledge your comment in the chat that you're usually a host, but this year you're a guest and your daughter has her own style. And what can you bring in a way that feels respectful and loving and fun and deep, right? So as we go through these questions, let's see for you and for the rest of us, what is it that we can bring to the table, literally. So what I'm sharing with you is really and by the way, we're going to do a little tweak on this that we noticed today. So there's going to be another version to this handout that we're going to update on the website. But this is pretty much it. So you see the first question over here, Manishtana, how are we different this year? And that's what you can share with a guest. And here is the host note, right? A few more ways to think about how this works with the rest of Seder, whether you're pouring the first cup of wine, whether you're using something from the Haggadah, whether you want to start activating the Afikomen or Hafikomen, as we call it, which can be right after this. We'll get to that later. But make sure that you really are thinking of this holistically. And the first question gets us going. And that's going to bring us into question number 2. Whether you've read more highlights or blessed already a glass of wine, invited Elijah, showed the Seder plate with whatever is on it that might be different this year. By the time we get to question 2, we're really talking about what is the storytelling of the night, the Magid. And so I'm going to show this, but I'm going to stop sharing so we can actually talk about it. Okay. Here's something that I'm sure many of you know. The actual Passover story is not really in the Haggadah. What? Right? That thing from Prince of Egypt or the 10 Commandments, the actual chapters from the book of Exodus, it isn't told from beginning to end. Right? It's sort of told. And the reason it's not is Passover Haggadah was already written by rabbis who knew the story. They're already riffing. They're already in the commentary. But often, whoever's around our table, all ages, all stages of recognition of this narrative and wherever we are, it's good to like recap the story in some way. So whether you want to use it from highlights on Haggadah or not, our second question really focuses on taking a short amount of time to get sure we're all on the same page. What is the story we're talking about tonight? The original Exodus of the Hebrews from Egypt. So if you look at question number 2 on your sheets, and Taylor, if you can put it in the chat for us, then we're going to the line that says Avadim Hayinu. And you probably know the song. Avadim Hayinu, we were slaves. Our ancestry includes this chapter. We don't know for real that it was historical, but it is so much part of our narrative. It is so much part of our ethos that we were. And at different times in history, so many individuals and nations were enslaved in the narrow place, which is what Mitzrayim means. It's not necessarily Egypt, the country. It is the notion of being oppressed, of being under tyranny, of being not free to make your own decisions, of being in a situation where authoritarianism is limiting your freedom and your choice and your life. And if that sounds like, oh my God, that's us now, well, we all have ancestors, and we are the ancestors of the next generations as well. And we're going through something right now. And so Avadim Hayinu is our way, before we get into today, to say, what is the story about? Our version of it in this time is, tonight we tell a tale of liberation. Our Hebrew ancestors were oppressed for centuries before the fight for freedom, celebrated on this night, led them out of the narrow place known as Mitzrayim, Egypt. What aspects, tools, strategies, and methods of this historical struggle for freedom can still shape our personal and political realities today? What new narratives can we reimagine to help move us from despair to repair? So that's a big conversation again. And before you get to that next part about what do we do with the story, we really suggest that you tell the story. Here's one way of doing it. I'm pretty sure that we have time right now. If we took 5 minutes to say, okay, popcorn, where does the story begin? Once upon a time, there was a baby or a king, there was a people, or there was a war, there was a burning bush, or there was a sea that split in two. Depends where you want to begin the story. There were midwives. There was a brave princess who broke the law, etc. What we want to recommend and suggest that you, as host or guest, make sure that you really tell the story. Yeah, maybe it begins with the slavery of Joseph, right? Maybe it begins with Jacob, right? You choose what for tonight you can do. Let me drop a little suggestion there. Something I've done over the years, and I think I'm going to do it this year. I'm going to be co-leading Seder in Israel this year, and I'm doing it with a group of people of different religions and different backgrounds, including Christians, Muslim, Jews, Palestinians, and Israelis, Europeans, and Americans. I've done this before. We're going to see how it goes this year, but I'm dividing the group into two. And I'm saying half of you tell the story from the point of view of the Hebrew slaves, and the others tell the point of view of the Egyptian taskmasters. Give me two versions of the story. Huddle in the corner for 5-10 minutes, come back and tell us a 3-minute version and then we hear each other. Are we telling the same story? What does that tell us about narratives?
Incredible. Amichai, that is incredible. And it's bold. It's bold, and it's like it's the live theater that is part of this, the practice. Again, it's not a reflection of, this is not a lecture series. This is like active storytelling. And there's a purpose that we tell the same story every single year, because the story may be the same, but we are not the same. And last year, I remember distinctly one of the most powerful lessons I've ever received on the Seder was from Jalen, who was a theater director who taught us last year. I'm getting some smiles. Somebody knows him. He said something, and I think the quote that I remember him saying is, the Passover Seder is a political story because it is a people story. It is people's never ending story. And I'll never forget that because I know this is a people's story, but I loved the empowerment of the notion that this is a political story because it is a people's story, and I am the people, and you are the people, and what people aren't here at this table, as we asked earlier. But anyways, it just really it suddenly becomes very exciting to tell this story, not because we're reading an ancient history, but because we are reading a people's story, a never-ending people's story. Unmute, Amichai,
Yeah, no,
unmute.
I am. I was
Okay.
trying to share the Avadim Hainu, but my thing disappeared. Sorry.
Okay.
I am in Israel, by the way, y'all, and it is 1 in the morning, so I'm a little out of it. But here we are. Avadim Hainu, we were enslaved. This is on your screens right now. Again, the host note where we are asking the question, and then we're saying the Magid section is part of the Haggadah, Kadesh, Uchas, Karpas, Yachatz. You've already raised 2 glasses of wine. You've eaten some karpas, which means appetizers. Please don't just eat parsley. Eggs are great. Sushi is fantastic. Vegetables, don't wait till we eat. That is such a mistake. Yachatz is when you break the matzah in two and do the afikomen. We're going to hopefully get to that tonight. Right? Kadesh, uchatz, you've washed, kalpas, yachatz, magid, storytelling. This is where you could do some of the Haggadah. You could tell the story in 3 minutes. You could split it into 2 sections. You can do whatever. People like to show a bit of the movie, maybe. There's so many different versions. Or someone likes to talk about, here's my version of the story for this year. And so I want to say also, before we get into the third question, and in regard to what Shira was saying, I want to say a word about politics. It's our choice as hosts and maybe as guests with coordination ahead of time to say, look, before we get all political about 2025, American politics, Israel Palestine politics, world politics, we can decide whether we want to do that or not. A contract is really helpful. This story brings out ethical, moral speed bumps. It's painful. And so you might not be as ready to get right into what it means for us today with question 2. You might want to wait for that until we've had a little more wine and a little more food and a little more time together. One of the wisdom techniques of Seder, like so many other ritual dinners or these procedures of time together, is that it takes time to melt. It takes time to spend time together and hear each other out. I'm going to share a very short story that those of you in my Aleph Bet class heard last night. We are almost at the end of Ramadan, the holy month on the Muslim calendar, and I've been attending several iftars, interfaith events between Muslim Jews and others to end the fast day. And I was at one, oh my God, last night in Haifa with a very small group. And we sat for about 3 hours. And it took about an hour and a half for us to get into where it hurts. And we talked about the war. And we were Palestinians and Israelis talking about now what? It wasn't about Passover. It wasn't about Ramadan. It was about humans dealing with war. And we're all peacemakers, but we're holding different truths. We needed that hour and a half of small talk and some thinking and something and news to like, okay, let's talk about where we are right now. And so I want to suggest that the Seder procedure is one where we want to tell the story of the past, but we don't want to gloss over the fact that question number 2 is asking questions about liberation now, about what happens when victims become victimizers. Is, there's the 10 plagues is about pretty violent liberation, right? So there's questions there that can go there. You know your guests, or you know your host, and you know how can we have those conversations? Do they happen then? Do they happen later? Or do you say, guys, folks, friends, we're going to wait with that until a little bit later in the night, or not at all? but be clear, because you don't want a shouting match. We don't want people walking away from Seder hurting. And we want to acknowledge the fact that we're holding a lot of different truths right now, and some of them are conflated. So we just said a lot. I'm going to invite us to breathe together for a second, acknowledging how complicated this can be. And breathing through the Seder is another great technique, right? Okay, we've done Kadesh, Uchatz, Karpas, Yachad, Magid. Told the story, asked a tough question. Magid Rachza, we wash the hands again. By the way, little moist towelettes works really well. Or of course, a beautiful scented cloth. Kadesh, Uchatz, Karpas, Yachatz, Magid Rachza, Motzi Matzah, Maror, Korech, Shulchan Orech. You take out the matzah, and you take out the maror, the bitter, and you take out the charoset, the gastro-Judaic moment of tasting the mythology is one that deserves its own attention as part of the storytelling as well, right? And that very loosely brings us to the third question, which is Dayenu. If we've taken some time to talk about what is the story, where does this bring us? Avadim Hayinu, in every generation, we're supposed to remember that we've been through this. Then the third question for us, which typically happens after we've eaten quite a bit and some matzah ball action has happened, we get to Dayenu, which is a great song in the Ashkenazi and in other traditions as well. And we ask the question number 3, which is enough. Dayenu could mean enough. So what we'd like to do is read the question, but then invite you or a small enough group to break into breakout rooms of 4 people and take 10 minutes to respond to this question, maybe 8 minutes, 2 minutes each, because we're running a little late. So here's the third question. Dayenu, what will get us to cry out enough already and rise up to resist oppression, cruelty, and injustice, whether it is harming us or others in our orbit? How can we resist despair and lift up the brave voices that fight for human rights and justice, for freedom, dignity, and love for all? Who are our modern Moses, Miriam, midwives, and leaders of liberation? How do we say enough to this narrative of oppression? So I'm going to briefly just share the host guide so you can see what's here, right? We move to the third question, Dayenu, enough already, host note. This usually happens after the main meal and everyone's relaxed. We've had the third cup. And we'll get to the Afikomen in a moment, but it's a way for us to go really deeper into now. And so what we'd love to do right now, share any other thought before we break off into groups?
No, thank you. Let's do it.
Great. So you're about to meet some new friends. Time is limited, sadly, but we'll invite you to introduce each other to each other and go right into it. Read the question together. Imagine you're around the Seder table and you each get about a minute or so to respond. And as you do it, go through the experience and also think of what it's like to ask this question in a Seder setting. We're going to come back, take a reflection or two, and go to the fourth question to make sure that we give you hopefully a roadmap from the beginning to the end of Seder. All right? Then we have some more time to talk and share and hear your reflections. So Taylor, thank you for breaking us up into little groups. Say yes to the breakout room.
Say yes, say yes. Amichai, let's stay here for a second. You know what's funny? It's like, I feel like there's a joke in here about what if your Seder was 1 hour? You know, what if you see you need more time?
Well, it's a good thing we have this half hour to do this.
Yeah, I agree.
Whatever.
And we'll see. Maybe there won't even be breakouts. We'll see what happens.
They're on their way back in any second.
Thank you. Great choice to play the music. Did you play the music? Genius.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
had it going just really quiet while you guys were chatting. It
You're
looks like
so
they're
right.
finishing up on their own, and then the room will close in 30 seconds and force them.
It's perfect.
Let
And I mean it, this song is a bop.
my people go to the front of the bus.
16 dream tracks, we burning like cataracts. The politics still flat, the oppressors are getting fat. We trapped in the zone black, we dying, not coming back. Yo, a victim to what I started. Keep the bloody mics clack. Even taught Yasser how to make mistakes and there is fat. Live trial and terror, my click nights full of errors. Can't travel to crack apples, so we travel in pairs. Passion niggas anthrax for just judging my climax. Continue to stack my bloody articulate syntax. Your niggas merely messengers, cultivating seeds, releasing scriptures. You rappers keep bringing pestilence against my wish.
Well, that was a speed dial version of the third question. And again, we're sorry that this is so truncated in the express trail. We're learning also. Again, last year we did 4 sessions, an hour each for each of the 4 questions. And we figured this year, just condense it and see what happens. Everybody's so busy and freaked out. So this might be too fast. You'll tell us feedback later. But what we're hoping is that you got a chance, if not everybody, then most of you got to like reflect on this third question, like what does it mean to resist? How do we say Dayenu? To so many ways in which there is oppression and there is narrow-mindedness and there's ways in which freedom is fleeting and needed in so many, many ways. So imagine that you're around the Seder table and it's been about an hour and a half or 2 or so, and people have eaten and songs have been sung, and you've raised already 3 cups and you've asked 3 questions, and maybe the Hallel comes now. After Shulchan Orech, you set the table. You bring back the Afikomen that we're going to talk about in a moment, and the our style, and then you get ready. There are some of the big beloved songs. You open the door to Elijah. Remember that moment? Magic. Very problematic prophet. But in the Passover tradition, he represents the vision, the prophetic vision. We open the door to the future. We open the door to visions of openness and welcoming and being each other's hosts and guests and many other ways of what the open door represents, which leads us to the 4th and final question. So the Passover Seder, as many of you know, ends with the words L'Shana Haba'ah B'Yerushalayim Habnuya. Next year in a Jerusalem that is standing, that is built. And this was obviously written at a time in the rabbinic period in which Jerusalem was in rubble. It was a destroyed city, post-destruction. The hope was one day we'll be back home. Jerusalem represents not just a physical location, but the symbol of the city of peace. It represents all the future of what we believe is goodness and well-being for all. And so clearly Jerusalem is also a city today that is dealing with much, much heartache, and yet it is there and it is built. The dreams of our ancestors on some ways became real. And yet we want next year to be not just about the physical Jerusalem, but the sense of Ir Shalom, the city of peace. So we dedicate our 4th question to L'Shana Haba'ah. What does next year look like as the visionary exercise in collective optimism? So you're going to look at the text here in the chat. L'Shana Haba'ah, whether you mean Jerusalem and the peace for Israel, Palestine, the entire Middle East. Our question is, next year in Jerusalem is the way our ancestors have wrapped this night up through the ages, always dreaming big of what utopian peace can look like with serenity. Radical imagination is our recipe to dream big and commit to co-creating a more just and loving, more peaceful and kind world. So imagine this night, our world, 1 year from now, Passover 2026, right? Can't imagine next week, but share your vision of the world you want to live in. What steps will you take to get us there? Start small or go big. Identify something you will do personally to contribute for the sake of our families, friends, and for all beings on this planet. Lashana Ba'a, what's a vision for next year? And in previous years, people have gone wild and very tender. I remember last year, again, at a very big Seder in New York City, where again, there were people of different faiths and religions. The war was already happening, and a Palestinian guest said, "My vision for next year, we are family. Just we are family." And we all wept and raised the fourth cup to that vision. So I'm seeing Julie's note about your brother-in-law dressing in whatever is in the closet to come out as Elijah the prophet. Drag is always welcomed, as well as whatever fun costumes. And Paul Adams reminding us that the word shalom is from the word shalem, which means complete, right? Wholeness. How do we have visions for wholeness for the future? So what we want to do is invite ourselves to end the Seder. If we began with this question of Manishtana, how are we different this year? How are we acknowledging some of the hardship and the sorrow? And how do we go through the journey of this is the story, Avadim Hayinu, this is Dayenu, this is how we interrupt these patterns of oppression and systemic oppression. And what does the year into the future look like? What is your vision of hope? The recipe for for Passover night is matchil begnut umesayem b'shevach. You begin with where it hurts and you end with optimism for the future. You go through an arc. And so this is the arc that we're proposing here. I'm sure I want to invite you to share a couple thoughts as well. And just to say, in the few minutes we have before we're going to split off into two groups, I also want to pay attention to this notion of the half a matzah, the afikomen, and show you on our handout how you can take it and make it into something much more exciting than it usually is, interactive, where we can walk our talk to make the world better. Shira.
Yeah, stick around for that because I think that's going to be a lot of fun too. That's just a whole other fantastic part of this. L'shana haba'a b'Yerushalayim is like the final line of the Seder. We sing it. It's in the Haggadah, like the last line you say before you close it and you're gone for the night, which means it is like an incantation. It's like the end of the spell. It's like an amen. So you can I love this because the fourth question in Seder, SAY Seder, is an invitation to huge reflection and true dreaming, and the word collective optimism again is not reflective. It's not passive. This is real life manifesting. It's critical that we do this part. That's the end. If it's not done, if you haven't done that section. So that means that everyone is called to the plate to participate. And if you don't have time to have like a full reflection and to really talk about it, and if that's not the nature of the Seder, then maybe there is some other way that, as Amichai often says, words build worlds. The language we use, the words we choose are the way we name and define and move forward. And if we want to be the change that we want to see in the world or that we want to be in the world, we must be the change. Manishtana halayla. Remember, manishtana halayla. What is the change? We are the change. And at the end, b'shana haba'ah, it's clear that's us. The question was referring to us by the end, and maybe there's a way to design as a table. What should the final words be? Is it l'shana haba'ah? Is there another phrase that you feel must be said in order to seal this ritual? Maybe you do an improvisation game and you go around and everybody at the table says a word until you have a sentence put together. There's ways to do this, but the key is a leaning in thing. So it is not just reflective conversation. It's potent. It's really critical. It's really critical. And it's our contribution to the world. So we do Seder for so many reasons. One of the reasons we do Seder is to help make the shift that we so believe in.
Yeah. Amen. Words do build worlds. And something else that we want to share with you before we break into two groups is the secret of breaking the matzah into two. So, oh, again, I just did that. Why am I not opening the right thing? Sorry. Afikomen. So many of you might know this already. Afikomen is a Greek word which really means dessert. And when the rabbis introduced the idea of the Passover Seder, they were living in Roman times. They were leaning on couches, sitting on these big symposium style setups. And they used the Roman terminology for walking through cocktail, through dessert, questions, drinking. By the way, the 4 cups is also a Roman thing. It doesn't mean 4 simple cups. It means there were 4 buckets changed throughout the night. So you had a lot of refills through each night. That's what that was all about. By the time they get to the dessert, they shared the afikomen. So I want to show this to you here. The Lab Shul way has been for years, we call it the afikomen, because you break the matzah into 2 at the beginning of the Seder, usually after the first question, actually, or maybe before the second. And then you do the following. I'll just give you the highlights and you're welcome to look at it later. You're going to ask people to go around and say the names of organizations that are working for freedom, justice, better world. People write them down. If you're at a Seder that doesn't write things down, then people just remember what the ones they want. You can also pass around a hat or an empty matzah box for people to put money or a pledge to donate towards a better world. Then there's a list of organizations and there's a bunch of money or pledges that is sitting there. And when you break the matzah into 2, somebody does that, you hide it. And the half a matzah, that's the hafikomen, that is hidden, somebody needs to find it. A kid, a motivated grown-up. And that happens all throughout the dinner. By the time you're ready for Hafikomen part 2, you're between the 3rd and 4th question. And whoever finds the Hafikomen can look at the list of organizations and say, this is the one I choose. I want to give it to, you name it. And then we count up the money. And the Seder guests together collectively are going to support this organization or 2 or 3 that whoever stole the matzah, the hafikomen, chose. In years past, there have been anything from the New Israel Fund to the Trevor Project to environmental care to standing together to projects that support anti-racist education. And people have come together to really walk the talk and not just build worlds with words, but donate and walk away and offering people a way to end the Seder with this sense of generosity. Often it's been kids or younger teens who've stolen the matzah and they would go to these organizations afterwards and donate on our behalf. So it's also a way to do what the Seder is about, empower the next generation, move it on so that we really walk our talk. So Afikomen is also part of your guide. And we want to take another breath right now because we just breathlessly walked through an entire Passover Seder recipe with 4 new questions inserted into your Seder or replacing your Haggadah. And I'm sure we have comments and thoughts and questions and ways to reflect. There are some stories you'd like. So what we would love to do, Shira and I, for the next 20 minutes, split into 2 groups. It'll be smaller. Shira is really going to be focusing, if you have questions about doing Seder for families and young children. And I'm going to invite you to stay with me if you want to really think about applying these 4 questions, this Seder, to a more grown-up Seder, which might be the case with some of y'all. And then we're going to come back at the end for just 8 minutes of just sharing some thoughts and next steps and how you 2 can send this on. All right. So please join Shira in the breakout rooms that Taylor will facilitate in a moment. or stay here with me in the main room. So thank you for being with us. Shira, I'm going to hand it over to you to help us wrap it with anything that's coming up or some other things. I will just say, Shira, we were asked that we have our Haggadah from COVID and our slide deck with all the blessings for Seder. Rose was asking if we can share that. And I'm like,
Do you mean that which let's talk about I was recently revisiting the Freedom Feast, the 2023 Freedom Feast slide, but I think you might be talking about something like from 2021.
Well, we had a COVID one in which we did the entire Haggadah, and from our Freedom Feast, we have the deck of cards with all the questions and the blessings with our lapsal translations.
Yeah.
Right? I'm like, I wonder if we can make that available. So let's talk about that tomorrow.
Let's talk about, we have your emails. Everybody here registered. So we have, I love that idea. And I have to say, in reviewing the Freedom Feast slides, the way we've translated the Kadesh, Urchatz, Karpas, Yachad, alone is so interesting. It's like, it's really, really helpful to get so present tense with this. It really, it's right there. What'd you say?
Next year, a Haggadah.
Yes, of course. Next year, a Haggadah. Let me ask you this, everyone, as our closing seal. So we remember we talked about from Manishtana, from what is the change now to what is the change we want to be and see. What kinds of words, even in your preparation, we are about half a moon out. We're just nearing on the new moon, and that gives us about 2 weeks before Pesach. That's about half a moon out. What do you want to put out into the world? What is alive for you right now in this process? How are you stepping into the whole Seder making, wherever you are in this, whether you're going to be a guest or you're going to be a host, or you just have a question, or you just want to observe? Let's pass around the microphone, the matzah, the horseradish, and like, let's hear from each of us just a word or a phrase, and Taylor, how fast can you type? I feel like you can type really fast. Taylor's gonna take it into the chat so we can record this as our closing L'Shana Haba'a B'Yerushalayim, but just of Seder preparation, just the potency of even taking these steps into it.
I'm ready to.
Taylor's ready. So here's how it's gonna go. I'm gonna if you'd like to pass, you can just say I pass, okay? But I'm gonna call on someone, and you're gonna unmute, and you're gonna say your word, and then you're gonna call on the next person, okay? You ready? Get set. Terry.
Connection. And I'm going to call on David.
Engage. And I will call on Michael.
Holy Planet. And I will call on Tara.
Mouthfuls of meaning.
Who do you want to call on?
Sorry, I call on Jed.
Jed, you're on mute.
All right, renewal.
And Jed, who do you want to call in?
Diane. All right.
Hopeful. Allison.
Excited. And I call on Rose.
Are here. And I will call on Andrea.
I'm sorry, Rose. Could you say that one more time for me? I couldn't hear you.
Hinenu, we are here.
Wonderful. Thank you.
UD, and I will pass to Paul.
There was a word that we used at Rosh Hashanah Bohenu, which that it was like being brave. We are brave. We are brave. Bohenu. And I would like to pass on to. Has Monica gone?
I have not. Being intentional. And has anyone not gone yet? I pass to Judy.
Enthusiasm and stamina.
Mm.
And I call on Julie.
Unity. Thank you so much.
You can pass it to me.
To Shira.
I feel excited. I feel excited for what's possible. And I pass it to you, Amichai.
Feeling trepidation. I'm feeling, the trepidation, everything we just shared tonight, your wonderful questions, the ways to be thoughtful and preparing, not just show up and dial in. What's at stake here? So this is really a night that takes us personally and collectively into hope and into liberation and to committing ourselves to being co-creators of a better world, bit by bit, on this holy night. Shira, thank you so much for being a great co-creator. Taylor, thank you. Look at this poem we just created on connection to commitment. And please don't hesitate to reach out with more thoughts, questions, feedback. We know this was an express train, and we usually like it local, but hopefully this was beneficial. So if you've got feedback, we'd love to hear it. We're going to have another one of these next week. I'll be leading it together with Naomi Les, another one of our ritual leaders. And we're going to focus a little bit about teenagers, because that's a whole other group of people who are going to sit around the table who want to not just be on their phones, make this work. Couple more things, Shira, you want to share some of the coming up? Aleph Bet, my class is ongoing. Some of you are in it. April 4th Sabbath Queen that Shira is going to lead. Representing love from Israel. And our Passage Retreat. Super exciting.
That's it, everybody. I really appreciate it. I know I have some background noise in my thing, so I'm going to go back on mute. But thank you. This was a hearty and full and beautiful and much appreciated. Please feel free to unmute and say hello. And thank you, Amichai, for coming in for so late in the middle of the night on the other side of the world. It's very precious to be here with you. Taylor.
Very Passover style.
Amazing. Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Taylor, for holding this temple. And come back on April 2nd. We'll do it all again. If you want another dose, we'll be here. We'll ask more questions. And thanks, everybody. Thank you so much.